Welcome to our next tutorial video in this module on how to use email effectively. As you can see, this time we're going to be going through templates that are about how to ask for a job or internship directly. Now, technically you can use this strategy at any level, but the truth is, as I say here, that it really tends to work the best when you have directly relevant experience if you are a career changer, or you're at the MBA level, for example, and you're trying to move to a new industry. Generally, you want to take advantage of alumni and on-campus recruiting and other types of extended networking like that, as opposed to asking people directly for a job. A good example of where this works is, for example, many undergraduates get private equity internships or other buy-side internships at small local firms, and then they want to go work at a large bank the next summer or during an internship in the future or full-time after graduation. If you're in that position, this strategy can work very well because your experience is directly relevant, because you have the skill set they're looking for. They can literally just hire you, and you'll probably be able to do most of what they need on the job, or at least learn very quickly. So it works very well if you're from that type of background. If you are somewhat beyond that, so let's say you're already working full-time, this strategy could still work. And we'll look at an example of how to make this type of request when you are working full-time and you want to move into a different field, but it tends to not work as well when you're moving to a dramatically different field. So for example, in these templates for requesting jobs or inquiring on jobs when you're working full-time, if you're going from corporate finance at a company to private equity or investment banking or to an industry group at a bank or something like that, then sure, it's plausible. But if you are going from marketing or working at a nonprofit to a hedge fund, that is going to be very, very difficult and arguably almost impossible. So you have to use discretion about when to use these and when not to use these. And like any other tool that we give you, you cannot just blindly apply it and start using it without thinking about what you're doing first. So here we are going to cover several different variations of these emails. First off, what to do when you're directly asking for an internship as a student or a recent graduate. Then templates for following up when banks say they're not hiring. So when you reach out and you directly ask about internships or jobs, 99% of the time you will get a response that says, "We are not hiring." Now I say 99% of the time, but in most cases you won't even get a response. When you do get a response, of the responses, the overwhelming majority will say something like, "Thanks, but we're not hiring," or "We don't hire interns," or "We don't have a need for interns right now," or something like that. When that happens, of course, you cannot just give up, because persistence really does pay off, and you have to have a sense of when to persist and when to keep going back to them, and then when to give up and when to move on. As I say here, the best way to determine that in advance is to see if they have specific objections, like a lack of money or not enough deal flow or something else like that. If they cite specific reasons why they don't want to hire you, they might potentially be interested and you might be able to change their mind. But if they don't really give any reasons, you persist and they just refuse to explain themselves any further, they just say, "We're not hiring, that's it," and nothing else is ever heard from them, then in that case, they're probably less interested and you're probably better off focusing on other firms. So let's start with these templates for directly asking for internships as a student or recent grad. Of course, we do have a cold email template elsewhere in the course, but these are slightly different, shorter, and sometimes they can be more effective. So this first one, we list the firm name and then the university name in the subject to build credibility, and include the summer internship reference to show them exactly what we are referring to or what we want here. And then here, it's interesting that we do not start off right away by saying, "My name is such and such, and I'm from this university, and I have these skills, and I worked at this firm in this internship." We actually start off by just asking if they're interested in taking on an intern in a certain team right now. One of the reasons why we're doing this in the cold email direct ask requests here is that often they're only going to read the first few lines of your email, so it really helps if you get to the point and you tell them directly what you're asking about up front when it's a case like this. Then we have the bit about him or her graduating in a certain month and year from a certain university with a certain GPA. Obviously, if it's good, you should list it. If it's not good, you should not list it. And then if you have relevant skills, of course you list them. And if you have relevant internships, of course you should list that. We do recommend attaching your resume for an initial outreach email like this if you're directly asking about a job, because if your resume looks good, which it should, then you have a much higher chance of actually getting a response in this case. Now, when you're contacting alumni or setting up informational interviews, you don't want to do that. But this case is a lot different, and we view it as more acceptable here. And then here at the end, we don't exactly give a comfortable decline or anything like that, but we do acknowledge upfront that we recognize this firm has a formalized recruiting process, but if this team currently needs interns because of high deal flow or really any other reason we could come up with, then they may have need of our services and we may be a good fit for what they're looking for. We don't say exactly, we know you're busy, so it's okay if you don't get back to us, because in this case, it is a little bit silly to say something like that. If they're really busy, they're not going to get back to us. And really, we're asking about a job and they're always hiring people. So it's not as if this is something that's optional for them. They're always thinking about it. The real question is, are we the candidate that they're going to be looking for? And here's an executing example. Deutsche Bank summer internship for UVA student. UVA is the University of Virginia, a good state school in the US that gets quite a few students, especially in the business school there, going into banking. And you can see everything he mentions here. A 3.8 GPA is on a 4.0 scale in the US and is viewed as quite good. You could probably get into any bank with that, or at least a GPA at that level would never prevent you from getting into a bank, so that's why we're mentioning it. We're mentioning this equity research internship because it's highly relevant, and the wealth management internship at Merrill Lynch because everyone does that, or at least almost everyone, and it's still somewhat relevant. The brand name of Merrill Lynch also helps us because Oregon Trail Capital is a lesser known firm, and so it helps to have that balance of a more relevant internship and then an internship at a firm with a better brand name. And you can see the rest down here. Now here's a slightly different variation where we are directly asking alumni about internships. And it's very, very similar, but we're changing around the order a little bit. Instead of asking if they need interns right now, we're instead establishing who we are in the beginning and what university we go to, what types of internships we've had, and then what we're looking for the next summer or some other time period. This type of structure tends to work well when you have a brand name university, a place that's really well known, and you've also worked at firms that are really well known and are very, very relevant. It's good to put the most impressive information up front, and that's why we've done that in this variation. Now, the rest of it is largely the same. We're just saying I found your name in the alumni database, and again, if you have high deal flow or you need interns to help with certain tasks that I can do, I'm available. We've attached the resume and look forward to hearing from the person soon. So you can see an executed example here. CMU, Carnegie Mellon University, is another good school that everyone in the finance world will know. He has this internship at UBS, which of course everyone knows, doing equity research, which is highly relevant. So it makes some amount of sense that he would put all that information up front, and he's going for a hedge fund internship the next summer. Notice here how he lists due diligence and industry research and valuation and financial modeling and also administrative work, but he doesn't list M&A modeling or LBO modeling or leverage buyouts or anything like that because it's a hedge fund. So presumably they're not going to be doing that. They're going to be more focused on valuation and investing in public company stocks or other types of securities. And then here's another template, this time for requesting jobs or internships via a referral. Once again, you always want to put the referral's name in the subject, and then you want to indicate what you're emailing the person about. So investment banking internships, or IB internships, or private equity internships, or PE internships. The introduction, once again, we list the name of the university we're at, the graduation date, the referral name, so whoever refers to this person. And then we list the skills that we've developed so far, And then once again, we acknowledge that we do know the bank has a formalized recruiting process, but if this team has high deal flow, this person could be of assistance. We're not really even proposing specific times to speak with them. We're just saying, would it be possible to arrange a call? And when you contact people like this and you request jobs or internships directly, in a lot of cases, it makes more sense to say something like this as opposed to saying, I'm free Monday through Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. That type of proposal is more appropriate for an informational interview request. When you're directly asking about jobs or internships, it's best to leave it at this. And then you can see the execution here. This is another UK-based example. So once again, note the language changes. Penultimate year student at the University of Warwick. We have the graduation date. Private equity internship. We have the relevant skills from private equity right here. This person's going for investment banking internships, so we focused a little bit more on deal analysis here, whereas in the hedge fund one, we didn't include it because they don't really work on deals. They just invest in public company stocks or bonds or other types of assets like that, but they don't really buy and sell entire companies. Once again, language changes, CV instead of resume. Formalized, of course, is spelled differently, so just be aware of small points like this when you're emailing someone in a different region or you're in a different region right now. Now, the next set of templates we're going to move into here, as I say up here, these are really for following up when banks say they're not hiring. We're going to start with a few gentle examples and then move into a bit more aggressive language as we go down. Now, you always have to be careful about what you're saying and how you're saying it, because there are definitely cases where you can go too far and sometimes you're not really good at picking up on what they're telling you. So this takes a bit of practice, and you have to get started emailing people and getting responses to get a good gauge on when you should persist versus when you should not persist quite as much. But here's an example of a follow-up. So this email is actually almost identical to some of the ones above. Once again, we have the same line, whether any coverage teams are experiencing high deal flow and are in need of interns. For example, it's my understanding that a certain team recruits interns off cycle. If you don't know that for sure, then of course you leave out that sentence entirely. But if you can say something like that, or you can make a guess or a conjecture, you can certainly leave it in. We have this part about thanks very much for your quick response in the beginning, because this is presumably in response to a previous email or phone call or something like that. So we don't need to reintroduce ourselves and explain who we are all over again, because we've either exchanged emails or spoken with this person already. And then again, we point out our previous internship and financial skill set here. And you can see the execution once again down here. Not really too much to say. It's pretty simple. This next template, the follow-up email template, if the banker refers you to another group at the firm that may be hiring interns or may be hiring in general. So in this template, you always want to quote the people that you have already spoken with and to cite their names specifically, because you're probably going to be using reply all in something like this, or at least CCing some people on this. So you do want to include their names here, and then you want to list the specific firm name and the group name. And once again, we use the same line. We understand you have a formal recruiting process, but I could add a lot of value given my skill set. So here's an example of how to execute it. JP Morgan investment banking internships. Following my earlier exchange with these people, I'm writing to you about a possible internship in the JP Morgan Financial Institutions team. Once again, this is a UK example, so the spelling is slightly different, just something to be aware of. And we're not describing our entire background here because this is an email that is in response to probably several other previous emails. So if they wanted to, they could go back and get our resume or get our previous background information as well. Now, those examples so far are all pretty straightforward, and they're just really gentle follow-up in responses to actual responses from bankers. But if you get a somewhat more negative response, so if a banker replies and says, we're not hiring, then you want to reply to it, and the subject can just be whatever you used initially and just put re in front of it because you're replying to everyone. And so in the beginning, we thank them first. We say, so you're saying, for example, that right now you don't have enough deals going on or enough investments to justify an intern. And we bring up the point that things could always change in the future because deal activity might pick up, you might need additional help, or putting aside this whole issue of deal activity, your team is still probably pretty busy. Maybe if they're not working on deals, they're working on a lot of pitch books or a lot of presentations for potential clients or other tasks that interns should really be helping with. And then we point out that if they have that situation, we could help out because we have previous experience in those areas, and we could also even do a short trial internship. So we're doing a couple important things here. First off, we're saying that their fundamental premise in the beginning may not, in fact, be correct. Then we're saying that even if they are correct, there are probably other things that they could use help with that full-timers shouldn't be doing. And then we're also saying you don't have to hire us full-time right away, or you don't even have to give us an internship. You can give us a trial internship where we work together for a week or 2 weeks, see how it goes, see if we're actually helping you out, and if so, continue with it. In sales, this is called a risk reversal technique. I'm going to actually write it on screen because this is important. Risk reversal technique. It's sort of like how on our courses we offer money back guarantees. Well, it's largely the same idea here. We're saying you're not really going to take a big risk. You're not going to commit to spending a lot of time or money. Just try a short trial, and if we're helpful, great. If not, you haven't really lost anything. We don't mention doing it unpaid because we don't think it's necessary to say that up front, but if it comes to that, then yes, if money becomes an issue, you can certainly offer to do this unpaid as well. And you can see down here, narrow C capital. Yes, I get bored sometimes coming up with these email templates, and sometimes I pick names from books or video games or TV shows. Summer internship for Columbia student. So we have the execution here, and we're largely following the same template above. And here we point out that we do have experience with modeling and creating pitch books, two things that we could probably save them time on if we're good enough at those types of tasks. And then if there's continued resistance, let's say the person replies and says, yeah, that's nice, but we really don't hire interns and we just don't have time to train you. We really don't have time even for a trial internship. Everyone here is super busy. Then you reply and say, okay, thank you. I understand your concerns, but you actually won't need to train me. I've already worked in these industries or at these firms before, and I can help with anything at all that's taking up too much of your time. Now, at this point, you have to judge whether or not you've gone too far. You have to look at the tone of their email and see if they're giving you very short responses and they seem annoyed. If they seem annoyed or they have stopped responding to you professionally or they seem less enthusiastic about talking to you, then maybe you don't go this far and you don't go to another follow-up email with them, or maybe you do it on the phone. But you have to judge the situation a little bit and see if it's appropriate to do this or not. In general, though, I would encourage you to keep up a dialogue like this. As long as they're still giving you specific objections, I think it's fine. Some people will say it's going too far, but from what I've seen, especially university students tend to be far too timid with their networking efforts, so I actually encourage you to do this. Here's the executed example, and we point out that we've done corporate banking at Wells Fargo, so presumably we've gained a lot of the same skills that you would also use in investment banking. So those are a few examples of how to follow up when you get negative responses. Now moving up to the top, once again, the last topic I want to cover here is templates for job requests and inquiries when you're already working full-time. You have to be somewhat careful here because you want to give them enough information to be able to make a decision about you, but you also don't want to get in trouble at your current firm. So here's a very, very brief example. University name, alum, interested in industry name. And all we're saying here is I'm currently such and such at this firm, and I'm also an alum of this university just like you. I heard there might be openings in this team and wanted to reach out to you. Let's grab coffee together. Very, very short and simple and to the point. And chances are, if you're close together, you're in the same area, they'll do this because everyone's looking to take coffee breaks. Bankers do it quite frequently throughout the day. So it's very plausible that they would actually agree to this. Here's an executing example. So we have an Ivy alum here. Ivy, of course, is one of the most well-known business schools and a well-known school for banks to recruit at in Canada. consumer retail equity research associate at RBC, a Canadian bank. And he points out that he's an alum of the same school. And then he's asking about openings in BMO's consumer retail investment banking team. I don't even know if they have a strong team, to be honest, but this is just another example for a different region, Canada. And then here's another example of this. This is an alternate email template for a slightly longer example, actually quite a bit longer. With this one, we're leading by talking about the position name at the company that we're applying to. And we start by introducing ourselves and at least giving our name and saying what we're looking for. And then we describe our current job in a bit of detail and say that we've enjoyed it, but we're looking to transition to something else, and we're really interested in the opening that they have. And if you have relevant skills, of course, you should mention them here. And then we don't really directly ask them to hire us or to give us an internship. We are really asking about setting up a call to speak with the person. So this is not exactly an informational interview, but it's also not directly asking for a job quite like the examples above. It's somewhere in between. And it's perfectly acceptable to do this. In a lot of cases, when you're working full-time, it's actually better to do it like this because hardly anyone is going to just give you a full-time role or even give you an interview for a full-time role. Usually it's a process where you have to reach out, talk to the person, see if you're a good fit, and then you finally start going through interviews. So here's the executing example. Corporate finance analyst role at Suncor Energy. And yes, we have yet another example from Canada here. So we're giving our name, and then we're giving the specific position, corporate finance analyst, that is open within your group. Probably would have been better if we listed the actual group name here, but that's okay because we do have the company name in the subject. Graduated from McGill in financial economics and business, and he's currently doing business development at this energy-related startup. And his basic rationale here is that he wants to apply financial analysis skills to the energy industry. So it looks like he wants something that's more analytical and technical than business development, and that's his rationale for doing it. And then he says here that he passed the CFA and gained other relevant skills via classes and independent study. And then we propose here a few specific times to speak with this person. Notice also how at the end we're saying that we don't want an interview. We just want them to take a few minutes to look at us and see whether or not we would be a good fit with their team. Notice also here how, just like in the other example above, we're not actually attaching our resume. With a case like this, opinions vary, and some people will say, always attach your resume if you're asking about something like this. In our opinion, it isn't really necessary here because it's more of an introductory call or an introductory request, or briefly describing our background and saying that we want to move over, and then asking to speak with them on the phone. Now, when we speak with them on the phone, the ideal outcome there is that they will then request our resume or CV from us. And so that is what we should be aiming for when that phone call actually takes place. But if you're doing something like this that is somewhere in between an informational interview and a direct job or internship request, we don't think it's necessary to actually attach your resume. So that's it for this lesson. To do a quick recap and summary, we went over templates for directly asking for internships as a student or a recent grad and learned how many of the same principles apply. The key here really is to emphasize that you have relevant experience in the past via internships, clubs, anything else you can think of. If you don't have that, you should get it first and then think about sending out these emails. We had templates for following up when banks say they're not hiring. And the key there is that you need to highlight their objection. If they're giving you specific objections, persist, counter them, and offer alternatives such as a trial internship or working unpaid or something else like that. And then we went through this final category for job requests and inquiries when you're already working full time. The key here is to keep it casual if you're just reaching out to someone else at your level, as we did in the first example. And then if you are reaching out to someone who's above you in level and a position that is probably going to be competitive to get and where your skills are not an exact match for it, then you should take some more time to explain yourself and use up a bit more space in the introductory email to do just that. So that's it for this lesson. Coming up next, we are going to look at our final set of email templates for staying in touch with people, for contacting recruiters, for sending thank you notes after interviews, for inquiring on your status, for getting feedback, and so on and so forth.